I want to introduce Jamie from CAF, Community Alliance with Family Farmers. I'm with the San Diego Food System Alliance. I'm an Advocacy and Leadership Director. And then I'll turn it over to Jamie to talk about her organization.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. For those, just out of a show of hands, who's heard of CAF before? Whoa, okay, sweet. So CAF it stands for the Community Alliance with Family Farmers. We are celebrating our 45th birthday this year. We're an old organization. CAF primarily serves farmers across the state of California with technical assistance and policy and advocacy, all along the range of helping farmers find markets, helping farmers with ecological farming practices, food safety assistance, wildfire assistance. We have a massive emergency fund. We have a tech hub. And so if you need resources, particularly if any of y'all identify as small-scale farmers or underserved farmers, we probably have a resource for you, or we can connect you to the right people. As part of that, we have a tiny but mighty team of advocacy and organizers. So I am CAF's policy director. I've been with CAF for about 3 years at this point, and so we're really going to get into the weeds around policy and advocacy and what all this means and how you impact it. So yeah.
Thank you. And I'm with the San Diego Food System Alliance, the organization hosting the event. So thank you for coming to the 3rd annual gathering. I've been with the organization almost 2 years, next week actually. I started the day before the 1st annual gathering. So we started in Coastal Roots Farm, and this is our 2nd year here in Escondido. And I live here in Escondido. I grew up here. I serve on the city council. I have over 20 years of community organizing experience. And my job at the Alliance is really to shape our policy advocacy work, engaging elected officials around Food Vision 2030, which many of you maybe participated in that. And to make that Food Vision 2030 a reality, I'll be sharing a little bit later what our policy priorities are, but talking to decision makers and elected officials. And so that is what we're going to learn today here together about, how government works. Jamie will cover a lot about that and the different roles and decision makers within those systems. And then later on today, I'll share tips on how you can talk to decision makers and elected officials. And hopefully we'll have some time to practice that. And you'll also get a tip sheet that you can take with you. So I have one in English and Spanish to remind you of, how kind of guide you through the process to practice talking to elected officials. So really excited to share this with you and to hopefully in the future continue to offer more leadership development and advocacy opportunities here in San Diego County.
Okay, we're just gonna jump right in. Perfect. Okay, sorry, there's a lot of text on here. We wanted to make sure it's both in Spanish and English. So over the next few minutes here, I'm just gonna run down the basics, absolute basics of federal, state, and local governments, what they mean, and what are those differences, right? Because you might get that Instagram post, you might get that call to action of call your member of Congress for the Farm Bill, and what is that? What does that mean? Who is your member of Congress? What level of government is that? And I think it's really important for people to just get a basic understanding of these different tiers and what you're really impacting. So at the most fundamental level, there are 3 branches of decision making when it comes to our government. There is the executive branch, there is the legislative branch, and there is the judicial branch. I won't focus too much on the judicial branch, but generally, those are the courts. If you want to sue the government, or if you end up in a lawsuit, that is that branch. The legislative, right, these are the folks that make our laws. Things like the Farm Bill, that is made by your elected officials and then decided, in conversation with the executive branch. So that's at the federal level, those are your members of Congress. At the state level, as well as members of Congress and your your House of Representatives, so Congress members and senators. At the state level, those are senators and assembly members. And at the local level, you know, city council is a good example of that. And so when we talk about the executive branch, right, those are the folks that carry out the law. So the President Biden and his administration, they are responsible for carrying out these laws and making them happen. At the state level, that's Governor Newsom. So he is responsible, and his administration is responsible for carrying out these laws. We can go to the next slide. So, who are these people? Let's just name them so we have some connections. And what are the agencies that they're representing? So, at the federal level, like I said, so for executive, that is President Biden. That is the Biden administration. And some of the agencies that might ring a bell that are part of his administration are the United States Department of Agriculture, so USDA. Within the USDA, right, there's something called the Farm Service Agency, Natural Resource Conservation Services. Those are part of the USDA. And then at the state level, there's Governor Newsom. It is his administration. He is responsible for all of these agencies. All of these agencies, he is their boss. It's as simple as that. So some of the examples within state level agencies, California Department of Food and Agriculture, so CDFA, if anybody's applied to a CDFA grant, that is part of the Newsom administration, as well as California Department of Social Services. And then, of course, there are many, many local and county levels. So there's the Board of Supervisors at the county level, and then there's City Council. You can switch to the next slide. And so here are some examples of like what that actually looks like and who these people are as well, particularly on the legislative level. So legislatively, right, on the federal level, that is, you know, we have a new senator. We have Senator Butler and we have Senator Padilla. So at the federal level, those are the folks you call if you've got some problems with the Farm Bill. At the state level, you have another Senator Padilla here, and just to avoid any confusion, you have two in San Diego. And then you have Senator Atkins, and then you have several assembly members at the state level. So what are some of the bills that these people are responsible for? Like I said, these legislators are responsible for creating these laws, creating these bills. So at the federal level, that's the Farm Bill. I'm sure, who's heard of the Farm Bill before at this point? All right, that's a lot of the room. The Farm Bill is something that's decided every 5 years. It's nearly $1 trillion worth of programming and money for agricultural programs, foods assistance programs, all of those things. So if you have anything that you want to change about the Farm Bill, you have to call those people. Those are the folks you need to talk to. So just naming that, or for example, some other things related to the Farm Bill is the Farmland for Farmers Act, anything related to immigration policy, those are the folks that you need to call. When it comes to the state level, there's a couple examples of legislation at the state level. There is SB 616, which is a bill that was going through the legislation this year. Safety Net for All, which was related to labor issues. There was a couple other bills that were CAF-related bills, and so those were state bills. So if you have anything to do with like state money or state legislation, those are the folks you gotta call. Senator Padilla, the state one, and Senator Atkins, as well as several assembly members. So just trying to make some of these connections at these different levels, because it can get really complicated really fast, especially when you have two senators with the same last name. And then at of course the local level, right, there's ag commissioners. They're responsible for implementing things like pesticide regulations and quite a lot of other things. So those, you gotta call your local city council member to be involved in those kinds of things. So yeah, just really mapping out some of these tiers. You could go to the next slide. Yeah, please, on the local, jump in.
Thank you. And then just, so we also, here in North County, we have Senator Brian Jones. So there's more senators. And we used to have Senator Joel Anderson, who's now on the County Board of Supervisors. So politicians, they move jobs because of term limits. So you might be like at the state level, like Todd Gloria used to be an assembly member, and now he's a mayor of the city of San Diego, right? So there, a lot of the politicians move around. And do you think when you call Senator Padilla, he's gonna answer? Do you think he's gonna answer your email? Is he gonna return your phone call? No. The higher up you go, the least accessible these elected officials are, because they represent so many people, but you get to know their staff. If you were here in the morning, we actually had someone here, I don't know if they're here in this room, we had somebody from Senator Pro Tem Atkins' office here. He's here at the gathering. So if you have something that you want to get a message to Tony Atkins, find Cody. Cody, are you here? Okay, but see, they're here. Also at the city council level, I'm on the city council, and I also sit on the San Diego County Water Authority, you know? So that affects agriculture, right? Water will continue to go up. I'm sorry to bear bad news. So you want to, if you live in Escondido, if you have a business in Escondido, if you're a farmer in Escondido, I'm right here. Get to know me. I'm very accessible. I do answer my emails. I answer my phone calls because I don't have staff, But city council, Marianne Osmond was here from Council President Sean Elo Rivera's office. So she's here. She's his deputy chief of staff. So Marian is here, and she will take your phone calls, and you can talk to her about things in the city of San Diego. So I used to work with her too, so small world. But these are folks that you can access. So I think the more local the government, the easier it is to access. And so later on when we practice, I'm going to show you because I want you to directly engage with those elected officials. Same with the County Board of Supervisors. We had someone here from Jim Desmond's office. So they're here within this event. So when we announce the elected officials, always pay attention who they are and go introduce yourselves to them. I was sitting next to at lunch council member Eric Joyce from the city of Oceanside, and some lady came with her flyer, and I'm like, oh, she's good. She's lobbying Eric right here at lunch. I gave her my seat so she could lobby Eric. But wherever you find politicians, talk to them, introduce yourself. They need to know who you are. They be memorable to them so that when you call or try to get a hold of them, they'll remember who you are. So just I wanted to say that, it's very important, and it's one of the tools for political advocacy. Some of them you can get to, some of them are at an event, and just, like I said, try to get in front of them and let them know who you are and be ready to talk about your issues, and we're gonna talk more about that. But I wanted to just share more of the names of the people here and just how accessible or not accessible they are, just by design of the office they hold.
No, I think that's a really good point. And part of walking through this is really humanizing these people too. You're at the top of this pyramid. You're their boss. So you really need to and that's part of these exercises that we'll have later is figuring out and identifying ways to make you feel comfortable, right? Because these are people that have established that they have this status. They are important, but the reality is that you are the most important person in any conversation, and feeling confident in being able to have that kind of conversation and telling them exactly what to do. So just establishing that. So I'm gonna now jump into some really specific breakdowns of some of the things that CAF has been up to around farmer advocacy, farmer organizing, just acknowledging a lot of what I do is talking to farmers. So if you don't identify as a farmer and some of these priorities don't match up with yours, that's just because those folks are my, the core of my work. So if I'm not naming it, probably Consuelo prioritizes some of those issues that are related to your program or your work or your community. But I don't have any slides on this. I'll just kind of walk through generally what we do in our advocacy and organizing work, what we've been successful with when it comes to engaging farmers, and what we're thinking about for 2024 and how you can engage. So in the last, am I okay rate-wise? Sorry. So generally, this is every fall. I joke that I basically live out of my car for 2 months, and do a lot of farmer engagement and a lot of listening sessions with farmers, because fundamentally I don't feel comfortable going to Sacramento and expressing what the needs are of farmers without asking them first and having them involved in this process. So this is one of probably 15 events that I'll have this fall talking about these issues and getting feedback from farmers. And so last year I did this same thing and talked to about 600 farmers, most of whom identify as small family scale farmers, many of whom identify as historically underserved. And so just naming that is where a lot of the feedback that I get. And these are some of the things that I hear from them. And fundamentally, it's land access is the core issue. Water access is right there behind it. And access to capital and infrastructure is right there too. So those are the 3 core priorities that we work on. And of course, as we are experiencing the impacts of climate change, winter storm relief has rapidly surfaced as a priority this past year, so just naming that as well. So as I'm kind of going through those priorities and thinking about that and talking to farmers, these are some of the things that we worked on and we were successful with. And so the core is being able to actually successfully get $52 million in the state budget this past year. Most of that funding, it will be for winter storm relief. $27 million we're able to get into the state budget for direct relief, primarily to small scale farmers. And that'll come down in various different ways, but fundamentally, if we weren't able to get farmers to come to Sacramento and express to their elected officials the impacts that they've dealt with, that would never have happened. If we weren't able to get farmers to call and communicate, hey, I am in a desperate situation and I need direct relief from you, we wouldn't have been successful in getting that money. So there is $27 million that will come out through various programs in the form of relief. So if you know a farmer or you identify as a farmer and you were impacted by the winter storms, please, reach out and we'll be able to direct you to some of those resources. The other thing that we were successful in was unfortunate. Our governor decided to make some budget cuts this past year because we had a budget deficit, and they made the decision to make some pretty significant cuts to programs that support small-scale farmers. They decided in January to cut what would have been a food hubs program, so $15 million to create new food hubs. They decided to cut some urban agriculture program funding, and they decided to cut some funding to what is called the Beginning Farmer and Farm Worker Training Program. That was in January. Between January and July, we fought with the governor's office. We had farmers call in and express how important these programs were, and we were able to reverse all of those cuts. So we were able to, yeah, sure. So that's $25 million worth of programmatic funding, and the hope is that the California Department of Food and Agriculture will actually create this food hubs program. We'll actually put that money back into this urban agriculture program and put money back into this Beginning Farmer and Farm Worker Training Program. But we will continue to remind them of these priorities, and again, laying it on. If farmers didn't call, if we didn't have farmers go to Sacramento and express the importance of these programs, that funding probably would have remained cut. So just acknowledging every single time we have a win, it has nothing to do with just me. It very much has to do with making those phone calls, showing up, because we need to be the squeakiest wheel, absolutely, because there are 1.5 million lobbyists in Sacramento, and none of them look like farmers. Most of them look like business professionals that are asking for their own pots of money. So just acknowledging that. We also run some legislation to create new programs. One was for a tool sharing program and a cooperative development program. I am sad to say that the governor vetoed that bill 2 weeks ago. It made it through the entire process, and he had some issues with it, and we'll go back next year and we'll get it, because I continue to hear from farmers the need for tool sharing opportunities, as well as opportunities to think about developing cooperative land stewardship, cooperative food hubs, aggregation centers, and all of those things. So that is a fundamental priority of what we'll be working on in the future. So just running down what we did and the importance of all of that coming from engaging in farmers and listening sessions. That tool sharing idea came straight from a farmer, and we just turned it into a legislation. So making those connections of, we don't do this by ourselves. We very much do this kind of work in community. I'm looking at time. Okay, I'm good. So the next thing I'm gonna do, and this is a little bit different since we have more than just farmers in this group, but I think it's really great to hear from community as well about some of the things that we're thinking about for 2024. So for 2024, I'm gonna just run down what I generally think we should prioritize. And the first thing around land access is consolidation. We continue to hear that big tech billionaires, hedge funds, very, very wealthy corporations are just buying up land. Massive amounts of land, doing nothing with it and just using it for investment. We want that to stop. We're tired of it. Farmers are tired of it. There are instances where farmers are being sued by these big businesses for their water rights, and we are worried that in the future that we just won't have small-scale farmers. So we're planning on working on legislation to basically fundamentally change that structure and work on legislation that completely cuts back the opportunity for these corporations to purchase land. And that was inspired, honestly, by a federal marker bill called the Farmland for Farmers Act, which is happening at the federal level. So if you see anything related to that, I would encourage you to sign on in support of that. So that's one, and I'm gonna try and write these down as I'm not usually holding a mic, so this is a little different for me. So land, consolidation. The next thing we're gonna do is try and figure out how to create a program on cooperative land ownership. What does that actually look like? What are the pathways to take government money and actually move it towards communities of farmers that are interested in stewarding land cooperatively? So that is something that we are gonna continue to work on in this next year. When it comes to water, has anybody heard of SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act? Just a show of hands. Okay, not many. This is a very, so SGMA is a act called, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. The intention of that act is by 2040, we need to completely shift and reduce the amount of groundwater that we use in the state of California. A lot of these decisions are being done locally, and a lot of these decisions are exclusively happening by who has the time and the capacity to be in that room. And that's certainly not small-scale farmers. So we were able to secure some funding to actually fund regional organizers, farmers, to actually organize small-scale farmers in their communities to be in the room in these discussions, because we're certainly worried that if you're not there, there's a very good likelihood that they won't be able to have access to the amount of water that they need to steward their land. So we'll be working on engaging small-scale farmers in these regional discussions. The next one is capital and infrastructure. So around that, you know, the money that we were able to get back for urban agriculture, for food hubs, for the beginning farmer and farm worker training program, that's all supposed to get spent next year. So that money's gone. We'll actually be advocating for more money to go into those programs. We don't want it to just end with this one-time thing, right? Urban agriculture, they only had $10 million. $10 million didn't go a long way on a state level when it's been the first and only urban agriculture program at the California Department of Food and Ag. So we're gonna advocate to put more money into these programs, as well as create and put funding into this tool sharing and cooperative development program. Those are the three big buckets of what will prioritize our time and how we advocate. And knowing that that's just 3 big buckets and there's 1.5 million things that we end up working on in addition to that. So a lot of that includes, adding to this list is supporting ally legislation when our farm worker allies communicate to us that we need to support them. That means supporting climate change legislation when our climate change allies show up and say, hey, CAF, support this. That means continuing to work on winter storm relief, because all of the signs are pointing to we are going to get a lot more rain next year, and that means a lot more damage to our farming and farming communities. So continuing to advocate for continued winter storm relief, and also making sure that all of that money that we talked about advocating for is going into the right hands, right? In the Sacramento space, we say passing the legislation is just one half of the game. The second half is actually making sure that that funding goes to the right people. So that'll be a big part of our work and our priorities. So those are generally what I wanted to run down with you, and just naming that, yeah, this is really farmer specific and farmer focused, and certainly doesn't cover everything and doesn't cover the whole person. There's so much more when we think about our farmers, of healthcare, of housing. There's so much more involved in it, and we do our best to show up in those ways as well. But as I do my road show, these are the things that come up the most in those conversations, and it's important for me to do what I'm being told. So the big question is, knowing that not all of you are farmers, is like, is this an okay plan? Do people like this idea? Do people like these priorities and think that they're important for your farming communities? Or maybe you're friends with a farmer and you know that they've talked about land access as an issue. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna, there's Post-its and pens on all of these tables. And so I'm gonna run through 3 questions with you and allow you to just kind of like think about them on your own. And if we've got some time, maybe we'll have people share out a minute or so. Okay, so the first question is this a good plan? Yes or no? Plain and simple. Do you guys think that this is a good rundown of priorities for your farming communities? Super simple question. And then the second question, the first one is this a good plan? All of this stuff I've run down, these are our 2024 priorities. These are some things that we're planning on working on. Does this sound like a good set of priorities to you? Yes or no? Super simple. Okay, are we ready for the second question? Write it wherever you want. The second question is, if you're like, no, Jamie, you missed a big, big thing. This is not the right list. What's missing? What's really important? And really trying to think about, obviously there are 1.5 million issues, but if you think about your food and farming community, what's missing from that list? What's a huge priority that should be taken into consideration for 2024? Like, must happen next year. The third question is, and going back to, we are a teeny tiny policy shop of 2.5 people. We need to prioritize, otherwise we will get very little done. What's your number one issue? Of the things that I mapped out here, and maybe what you wrote on number 2, what is your number one must work on? For example, work on that land consolidation stuff. Get these billionaires out of here. This is insane. That could be it.
Thank you. So I'm not a farmer, I'm a consumer, but so from my selfish perspective, one thing I think that's super important is the land access and preserving our current agricultural land that we have, as well as identifying additional land and giving the farmers the support for that, because I think it's so important for us to have access to locally grown food and California grown food, and not to have our food coming from hundreds of miles away. So I think that's really important.
Other folks?
I wanted to add a priority I feel like that should be had is protecting immigrant farmers to be able to stay in this country and make a livable wage and be able to have working conditions where they're not overworked and their health and their physical bodies are protected.
Hi, I answered number one with a no, but an asterisk, because I don't think it's not a good plan. But when you ask number two, I think one thing that I've worked with small farmers for many years, and I think one thing that could really help them is education on the part of the consumer why it's so important to shop locally.
So I answered for number one, yes, but that's because I haven't spoken to any of the farmers. I'm not a farmer, and I figured I trust you. So if that's what they say are the three priorities, then sure, those sound like three good priorities. But I do have a question. So I'm a consumer. I'm not a farmer. I don't work in the food system at all. But I've read a whole lot about the food system and food politics, and it seems like you could actually have all of the money to fund all three of these priorities, plus all of the extra little ones, if you took money away from the big farms and all the corn subsidies and the soy subsidies and big agriculture that lobby for the farm bill so that it is exactly what they want it to be. So is there a way for small alliances like yours and for small farmers to rebalance that power imbalance? Is that too much of a pipe dream? And related to what the last couple of people said about farm workers' rights and farm worker health. So I read this really great book called Fresh Fruit, Broken Bodies, which is all about that. And I was wondering if so that book was published, I think, over a decade ago now. And has there been any changes in terms of visa opportunities for immigrants to do farm work legally so they don't have to do the illegal border crossing and they can actually have access to healthcare? Have there been changes in that area?
Yeah, I can answer it very briefly, also fully acknowledging I am not an expert around federal policy. So a lot of these things that you're mentioning are really held in that space, although there are still opportunities to try and figure out how we fix it on a state level. But yeah, I think as probably many folks share at this point, like the system is quite broken. These structures are quite broken, and some of the ways that we work within it is creating new structures within it, kind of breaking that cement and creating things to grow out of it, is kind of how I visualize it. And so, yeah, sure, if we had 100,000 lobbyists working on our issues, things might change a little bit, but I also really believe in the opportunities to encourage community and encourage and people power. We see that in a lot of political movement space. I think the farm worker space is actually one of the most inspiring here in California. A lot of progress has been made. Obviously, there's a lot more to go, but they hold a lot of power. I'll allow for one more comment, and then Consuelo's going to talk about how do we actually do this? How do we actually ask people for stuff?
Yeah, that's a good one. My name's Jenny, and I've been an urban farmer, and now I'm sort of on the program side of things. So I've seen sort of like, I guess both. I've lived in that world, and I've also I also attempted to start more than one community garden, and was only able to start one. I also attempted to start an urban farm, and I gave up on that as well, and it all was really due to politics surrounding land access and promises that really aren't promises for access to land to grow food. I believe that you could feed a community on a relatively small piece of land, with strategy, community buy-in, and living wage. And so my answer to number whatever question that was really the consolidation in land access. Like, if our minds are thinking about like big vast spaces like in the desert, or places where you see like tractors and on the TV and like in the movies and stuff, then that's one thing. But if we're also looking at like our inner cities and spaces that do have land available or land there to be used so that people can farm for their communities or on a smaller scale, then I think that I really think that land access is one of the first steps to getting that done.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and I think just to name like, and I didn't go through this, and I can go through how I think about these like forever. It's like when we think about land access, we actually really should be thinking about it with the context of like with water, with housing, with the equipment you need to be successful, with the markets. Like everything should be baked into it. It's not just here's 100 acres, good luck. It really should have a lot of bells and whistles attached to it. Okay, that's me. Thank you for participating in this conversation. At the end, yeah, thank you, Mai. At the end, if you could, I would love to read these and like see the feedback. So Elizabeth has done an amazing thing. And after Consuelo speaks, if you could put your Post-its on each of the questions, so question 1, question 2, and question 3. So hold on to them until the end.
Thank you. And then I will, I'm going to go over these policy priorities really quickly for the Alliance. But Jordan, if you want to maybe get that video ready, that would be great. Thank you so much, Jamie. That's awesome. And so Jamie and I just met in person today. So we planned this workshop on Zoom together. So it's been fun, Jamie. But so at the San Diego Food System Alliance, I have been with the organization almost 2 years, and just this year we finally decided like what are going to be our priorities, because Food Vision 2030 is really our platform. It's our agenda for what we want to see in our region, but that's just so much. And the document, I believe, is over 100 pages long, so that's like a lot. So what are we going to do, right? And I think a lot of what Jamie talked about is really things that we hear from our network as well. So just to share what our 5 policy priorities are, and it's improve the quality of life for food system workers. This is a gap that we see in the region. We don't really know, and again, here this came up because many of our farm workers just can't afford to live here. Or our food system workers, people who work in the food service industry, can't afford to live here. And then we know that rent is crazy, right? And many of us are getting priced out of even buying a home. I've been trying to buy a home for over 2 years, and I have 2 jobs. And it's just every day it just seems more further and further away. So one of the things that we're doing in this area, where do we start, is there is a new office at the County of San Diego for wage theft. And we know that a lot of victims of wage theft are farm workers or food system workers. And so really we want to maybe start there and getting workers to know that this new office exists and that they can get some of their wages that have been taken from them. So that's one thing we're talking about at the food system worker level. We want to, of course, support the viability of local farms, fisheries, and food businesses. We have the Local Food Economy Lab at the Alliance, where we provide technical assistance and support for food businesses, local farms, fisheries. We just started this year, and we'll be accepting more. Some of you might be in that program. Increase climate smart agriculture. We've talked about climate change a lot throughout the day. We know a lot of you are already working on this, so we want to support you in this endeavor and talk about this when we meet with elected officials and decision makers. And what Jamie was talking about, we want to have access to land, right? Expand community agriculture and promote food sovereignty. That is a very top issue for us, is access to land, and it's very expensive. And then I think one of the things here, if you own land, is you have the right to decide who you sell your land to, right? And that is like when I think about people who sell their homes, and my biggest pet peeve right now is at the city is my neighborhood is getting very gentrified, and people are just flipping homes to sell them for the highest price. And me, I want to buy a home, but I'm like, don't flip that house. I want that old house, and let me decide what I want in it. I don't want to pay $100,000 markup for what you made a modern house, right? So I want to find someone who owns a home that's wanting to sell it, but not to like flip it, right? So I think, knowing who owns land, and if you are a landowner, you can choose who you sell land to, right? So we need to kind of look at things differently, think out of the box a little bit with that, and talk to elected officials about changing how they lease public land and maybe for community agricultural use. Those are conversations we're having at the Alliance. And scaling up food waste prevention and recovery. Many of you might be involved in food banks and helping to rescue food so that it doesn't end up in the landfill. We know we have the SB 1383, the new state law that requires that we divert food waste from the landfill, and that is a mandate, right? And businesses are having to do it, restaurants, homes. We now have, if you have a green bin, you put your food scraps in that. And many of the people who are rescuing food from restaurants and businesses are volunteers, right? So this is a state mandate, but yet those folks are volunteers and they're not getting paid to do that work. So how do we support them? So just wanted to share a little bit. I'm gonna switch to the Spanish slide. So our Spanish-speaking friends can see it. But so those are some of the things that we're working on at the Alliance. And if, like Jamie meets with farmers and does one-on-ones, I want to have those conversations with you all. So if there's something that I did not list that you feel is important, I want to hear your stories. I want to meet with farmers. I want to meet with food businesses. What are those stories? Because when I meet with elected officials, I want to share your story. Right, and I want to give those real life examples, but I can do that as part of my role at the San Diego Food System Alliance, but then so can you. So can you. So today I want to talk about how to engage your elected officials and decision makers. And Jamie went over the different branches of government. We focus more on the county and local level at the San Diego Food System Alliance. I'm grateful for partners like Jamie and CAF because they're doing state legislation, which I don't have the capacity to figure out what's happening in Sacramento. I do not know. That's a whole other world over there. And even more in the national level, right? Like the Farm Bill. By the way, did anyone look at our Farm Bill table today? I saw somebody got a cool book that ran the zine. So at your table, you do have a workshop we're hosting a workshop with HE Alliance on the Farm Bill if you want to learn more. This comes around every 5 years. I'll share again about this later, but make sure you stop by our Farm Bill info table for more information. That's federal level stuff that I'm not an expert in, but I want to learn more because federal monies go to the state, it goes to the county, and from the county, it trickles down to the city. So I mentioned that my other hat is I am a politician. I'm an elected official, which is really weird to say that because I was sitting in workshops like this. I would show up to city council meetings here in Escondido when I felt like my city did not listen to the majority of the residents. I felt like everything they were doing went against my values. What they were doing was harming the new majority in my city, which were the Latino immigrant population. When I grew up here, I was a minority, and my teachers wouldn't even pronounce my name because they thought it was so exotic and hard to pronounce. But then in the early 2000s, the demographics shifted here, right? And the leaders at City Hall didn't represent or look like the folks that lived here, the majority. And so I decided to run for office because I wanted representation and because my elected officials didn't listen to me. They dismissed me and they harmed my community. And so I decided to step up to run. And so now I'm in this position from the outside on the inside, we call it. And it is challenging, but I always remember the priorities of the community when I'm there. And I'll tell you, we have very hard decisions to make, and there's no way that I can know everything. But you all are the experts of your community. And so whenever something's not working in our community, I need to hear from you because I have an idea of what's not working, but you all know even more, like in your neighborhood specifically, what's not working. So my colleague Jordan, are you around? Okay, so I want to show you an example. One way to engage elected officials is to come to our city council meetings or our county board of supervisor meetings or our planning commission meetings. You know, there's actually citizen groups that help give advice to elected officials to make decisions. And for land use, especially those of you who are talking about land and farm, get to know your planning commissioners because they are the ones that vote on projects, developments, and recommend to, say yes or no, and then that trickles up to the city council. They're the first layer of government. And so how do you connect with them? You can send them an email. But most of them don't have their email addresses made public. unless they're elected officials. You can call them, but again, to get their phone number, good luck. Good luck to even know who they are. They're not listed like on our city website. Also, city council members, we have public meetings. You can look on the city website and find our public meetings. You can go to the county board of supervisors and find public meetings. And so pretty much it's also great because I see you and I have to listen to you, right? There's, by law in our agenda, we have to tell you 72 hours in advance what we're gonna talk about. We cannot meet behind closed doors unless we're saying, hey, this is a closed session matter, like a lawsuit or something like that, or a personnel matter. That can be done in private. But the public's business is supposed to be public. That means you can show up anytime to our meetings. You can ask for a copy of my email. I'm a public official. Any communication that I get from you is public record, and you have a right to request who I talk to, who's on my calendar, who's on my email. So, did you all know that? By law, I have to do that. By law. We are bound to a bunch of laws and ethics. So Jordan's gonna play a video. Hopefully it works in the sound. This is a gentleman who spoke at a city council meeting in Escondido, and I wanted to give you an example of what a public testimony looks like at a city council meeting.
Good evening, Council. Last week, Oceanside City Council directed staff to prepare a law to eliminate single-use plastics. About 30 citizens offered public comments. Half were children between 7 and junior college, most fifth graders. Last night, about a dozen children under 12 years old spoke in Vista about banning pesticides. When was the last time a group of young students spoke to an issue in Escondido? Could it be because you were not addressing their valid concerns? Climate change is code red for humanity. I urge you to include an environmental topic in every council meeting. Surely you want to hear from our children who will have to grapple with the environmental mess that we have made as they become responsible for our world. And please impanel an environmental commission or a mayor's select commission, or give it whatever name you want. It can work with the city to reduce the harms to our community as temperatures rise and life on our planet struggles. In a council meeting last month, you agreed to appoint some kind of environmental commission. I understand that hasn't happened yet. I want to urge you to do it. It's required by your approved cap. Please, no more delays. Let's get on it. We have a crisis.
Thank you. He's pretty good, right? I'm going to ask for some help here. I need these sheets to be given to everyone, and then if you speak Spanish, raise your hand and we'll get you the blue ones in Spanish. So keep your hand up if you speak Spanish. So thank you. And then those with their hand raised, we're going to give you a Spanish tip sheet, and then I just need one for myself, the white one. Thank you. Yeah, so some observations. Give me some observations of of what you saw. He was not combative, so he wasn't like fighting, you know. Who else had an observation? Yes, Verna. So he wasn't just complaining, he actually suggested a solution to what he was talking about. In the back. He wasn't just talking about his personal opinion, he was talking about young people, right, who weren't at that meeting. Estela. And he's setting an example for, you know, grandchildren and the younger generation. So he was kind of modeling that. So another thing in the video, did you notice it was a timer? So you have a time limit to what you can speak, and it varies by your agency. Some people, if there's like a lot of speakers, this happens a lot at the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. If you have like 100 people who want to talk, it's the chair, whoever's running the meeting, usually the mayor or the chairperson of that board, can limit time. So if they normally give 3 minutes, they can say, hey, we have 100 people, we're gonna be here all night, I'm gonna only give you 1 minute. So be prepared to say, you know, what you gotta say. If you think you have 3 minutes to speak, be prepared to say it in a shorter amount of time in case you get cut off. And be respectful of the time. Also, before you even get up to there to speak, there's usually a form that you have to fill out. in advance to say, hey, my name is so-and-so, I want to speak on this item. You can speak on anything that's on the agenda that's published 72 hours in advance, or you can speak on whatever you want. And this is kind of my what I really want you to know. You can go talk to us whenever you want. When there's a public meeting, you can come talk to us about whatever you want. And people don't know that. Okay? Last night at our city council meeting, this two guys came and talked about their new nonprofit that they formed, a boxing gym to help at-risk kids stay out of gangs. It wasn't on our agenda, but he had called me in advance and said, hey, I need help, getting established in Escondido. And I said, well, we don't have any money, but let me, tell me about your project and I'll talk to people that I know who have money, because I love what you're doing. And then he said, should I come to city council? I said, yeah, come, so then my colleagues can know who you are. The people watching on TV, because some of these are televised, can know who you are. And you know what? He came to city council, spoke his 3 minutes, and all of the mayor, my colleagues were all very excited and want to help him. So it's sometimes just a way, even if the decision makers don't listen to you, people are watching in the audience, although there wasn't much in the audience there, right? And the decision makers are listening to who you are, and then the people watching online or on TV, whatever that is. You notice there wasn't a lot of people in that video because most people don't show up to city council meetings. I have a lot of situations where at a council meeting, there's no people, only the staff and the security or the police who are there for, security reasons. So that means that we're making decisions without much input from the community. And you have to pretty much trust that we're doing the right thing. But I think it's really important that we hear from you, the experts. Wouldn't you agree? Another thing with that man, he was calling us out. Because he talked about the CAP, that's the Climate Action Plan. In our Climate Action Plan, we said we're gonna form a Climate Action Commission. However, I have a new mayor now, I have a new city council, and they don't prioritize climate. I care a lot about the climate, but I'm the only one of my 5-member board. And if I'm talking about it, I'm only one person. I need 3 votes to make anything happen. So that commission will probably not happen. Because I'm like, we need a new election and we need new people, because that's not gonna happen, right? So elections matter, right? But also, people need to talk to my colleagues and say, hey, climate is important. Because I'm going to say, we need to do this, but my colleagues are going to be like, yeah, you always talk about climate. We don't care. We know where you stand, Consuelo, right? However, but if you come and you talk to my colleagues who don't prioritize that, and 20 of you come and ask for a meeting with him, don't you think you're going to get his attention, right? So it's important that they hear from you, whether you're sending an email, whether you're showing up to public comment, or writing a letter. I would say showing up in person is the best way to do it, or requesting an in-person meeting. Let me do a time check real quick. Any questions so far? Yes, in the back. Good question. So it depends on the agency. Every agency has different rules. I'm really excited that in Escondido, we allow you to come in person, which everyone does. We allow you to submit a comment on email. And not only that, but we read your comments out loud. Which it's City of Escondido and another city that does that. And I had to fight to keep that recently because my council wanted to get rid of that because we did it during COVID. And then they're like, oh, well, we're not in the pandemic no more. And I was like, we got to keep doing this. People that, we need that engagement. Why would you change it? So I convinced them to keep that. So depending on the agency, sometimes you're able to call in, but you have to call in during that time. Or sometimes you can submit it in writing. Most don't read it out loud, though, if you do it in writing. So the best thing is for you to show up. But some of these agencies meet at 3 o'clock in the day when people are working. So it just depends, right? But yeah. So the best way to know how to get in front of them is to go on their website, find out when their meetings are. Remember, 72 hours in advance, they have to post the agenda, and they'll tell you what time and what they're talking about. So great question. Any other questions? So there's a section, oral communications, which is a non-agenda public comment. So if it's something on the agenda, you have to say, I'm speaking on item 15. That's when you can speak only during that time that it's being discussed. If it's not on the agenda, then you do it on non-agenda public comment. So it's 2 types of comments. Okay, so let's go over some of these tips on public comment. I'm going to say it in English because we have some translation. So know the process, right? You know when they're meeting, deadlines for when you have to submit comments, things like that. Before you speak, remember that you're an expert. It's normal to feel nervous speaking in public, but you have a unique lived experience and you know your neighborhood best. So whether or not, I even get nervous still, it's normal to be nervous. Show up anyway. I've had people come and shake. I get emotional thinking about this guy. I have people come and just get emotional, and probably there was one man who came who was unhoused, and people had organized some of the unhoused people to come, and I'm like, that's who I want to hear from, people who are actually homeless. That's lived experience. Like, that's not who I usually hear about people complaining about our unhoused, but I had someone who was unhoused, and I felt back tears when he spoke, and just like his testimony, and then at the end of the meeting, I cried my eyes out, but yeah, so powerful, so powerful. Greet the public official. So say, hi, my name is, Jenny Lopez. I live in Escondido. It's the more you can connect to, if you're a resident of that city, say it. If you're trying to sway your elected official who's in your district, tell them, and I'm a resident of District 4. And you don't have to give your address in public, but do say your name, your first and last name, because you want them to know who you are. On the form, they'll ask you for some information, and that's optional. But hey mayor or hey supervisor, address them professionally. State your issue with a clear ask or request. What do you want them to know or do? Remember this guy that talked? He was specifically telling us what we should do and what we're not doing. And he reminded us of what we said we were gonna do. So very good, very clear communication then. And then share your story or explain why this issue is important to you. Give examples. Like, remember I talked about that man who was unhoused? He told me, I'm stressed out all the time, and I'm not trying to bother anyone, but I'm always having to be moved, where do I go? And just him telling me how stressed out he was, that he's getting moved from place to place and he doesn't want to bother anyone, and that really got me. He impacted me so much with his testimony. And then make sure you're watching the clock, wrap up and thank them. Remember to thank them, right? And someone said in the beginning that person was not combative. I will tell you, as someone who's receiving the feedback, if you're calling us names and telling us how awful we are, you're turning us off, right? I don't expect everyone to love us. Most people come to us when they're not happy with us, but be respectful, be civil, because I've had situations where people come and they're so disrespectful, and then immediately you'll turn off who you want to listen to you, and they're not going to take you seriously. They're probably not going to take a meeting with you. So be nice. That goes a long way in life, just in general. So wrap up and thank you. So this is some tips that I want to share with you. It's very, I think, easy. It's pretend like you're talking to a friend, but put it in an outline. But you all have this information. You all know what the community needs. A lot of times I hear people on Facebook or something say, oh, we need this, or why don't we do that? Come bring it to a city council meeting and talk about it, right? Because no one's going to read your comment on Facebook and do something about it. You need to go to these decision makers. And I read Facebook and Nextdoor and all that kind of stuff. So I still go out there and do that research because I like to know what the community says. But you need to go before the decision maker, before someone who can actually create that change. And again, if you can't get to Senator Padilla, the one, Alex Padilla, right? Then get to know his staff. And they're the ones that kind of take that role of listening to you and things like that. Any questions so far on public comment testimony? Yes. And I'll go here. Yeah, so Verna's question is, can the public attend public commission, planning commission meetings? Yeah, so there's also appointed officials, which is the planning commission or the neighborhood group, right? In City Heights, they have the City Heights Area Planning Committee. That's like a neighborhood level planning group. Then there's a planning commission, and then there goes to city council. Yeah, all those are appointed officials, and they have similar rules to like public officials. So yeah, you're always able to address them in public. If it's a public meeting, you have a right to go, right? You have a right. It's your right. And most times they're not going to go out of the way to do outreach. I always say that government does not know how to do outreach. And so I never, if someone posts it on the website, no one's going to go look to see when a meeting is. So I always go and I share it on my social media when I'm doing stuff. I had a question over here. Yeah. So usually on city pages, there's a city council page. That's where you can go find your representative. Like if you don't know which district you live in, you can see their meeting agendas, and sometimes there are even recordings of past meetings. So you go on the website of the agency you want to talk to. Okay. Any other questions on public comment? Okay. How many people feel now with the information that you've received, be honest, hey, I could do this. I can go speak before an elected official during a public meeting. Raise your hand if you feel like you could do this. Raise them high. Okay. Wow. Good. Yeah. Woo! How many of you have done it? How many of you have? Oh, good. Okay. Raise your hands high. Okay. We need more of you, all of you to do this. Yes. Okay. Anybody want to share an experience or two? Maybe someone who hasn't talked yet of how that went? Jovita, ¿cómo le fue? The first time I went to City Council in Vista to present in front of them, I was very scared. And I learned something from somebody from San Diego who taught me something really important. If you're scared, make that fear your friend and take them with you. So I learned that important lesson, and that's what I live by now. True. When me encanta. Good. Anyone else? Okay. So let's see. We have how many minutes here? I want to make sure be mindful time. We have less than 15 minutes. Let's see here what my next slide is. Okay. Couple announcements, and then we'll just open it up for questions. So I have on the table an advocacy alert email. If you don't have an email, put your cell phone number. If you're a Spanish speaker, put Español on there. So we're trying to get a list of people who want to put this to work, whether it's sending an email, making a phone call, maybe showing up to a meeting. I asked for your city and zip code because I want to, like if there's something happening in Lemon Grove, like I'll be like, hey, Lemon Grove people, this is happening. Like, you know, go support this, right? Remember Jamie was saying like being allies and supporting each other. So we want to start capturing those opportunities for you all to share with you, hey, this is going down in your city, like you should know about it. And then you can get the information, and if you're available and willing, act on it in some way. So we're starting this. This is, you're going to be my first advocacy list serve. Yes. This is only for advocacy. So yeah. So even if you're on our email list, this is specifically for me and to know that you're down to do some advocacy. Yes. And you know, of course, you know, it's up to availability and all that. We're not going to be like, hey, why don't you show up? See Estela. Yeah, Estela has a public service announcement to come help our community cleanups if you live in Escondido. I love it. Thank you, Estela. Yeah, so please fill that out. Also, this is Jamie and I's contact information. I'm going to send a follow-up email to people on my advocacy listserv. I'm going to put the information for Jamie's organization. If you want to sign up on her email list, you could do that. But this is how we connect and stay connected with each other. Because, you know, you took this workshop and then you leave and then I might never see you again. I hope not. I hope to stay engaged with you. I hope to be able to hear your stories and your needs and to work together on bringing change to some of these issues that we've talked about. So please sign up on the list. I talked about the Farm Bill workshop happening December 5th, 11 to 12:30 on Zoom. It's going to only be in English this time. Farm Bill is really complex and wonky, so it would be really hard to get that translated. But hopefully in the, we want to improve on that. But for this one, we won't have the capacity to offer it bilingual. But we are offering it in English, which is like, from what I understand, not a lot of, there's not a lot of information in San Diego County about the Farm Bill. So let's all learn together, because I'm learning too. Questions? And Jamie, you want to add or say anything?
Yeah, I think just to name like everything that she has run through in terms of public comment locally very much applies to the state level. Like providing that kind of feedback, a lot of it's, you could call in, you could Zoom in. But like I think just to double down, particularly from an advocacy perspective, like if you get an email, if you see something online that says, take 20 seconds to call Governor Gavin Newsom, please do it. Like part of the reason that I think that tool sharing bill and cooperative development bill died is I didn't have enough people calling his office. He didn't know it was important. And so those opportunities to really take those 20 seconds, like I swear they listen to the voicemail. If you just get a voicemail, they listen to it. They tally it. If you talk to a person, that's also great. Like please make those calls. Calls are always, always, always better than emails. So just naming that out front. So yeah, just it matters a lot. But yeah, otherwise.
Thank you. That's very true. And then one thing I didn't focus on a lot is like sending out like Google forms where you just put your email and check a box. Like CAF will do, they'll do a Google form and they'll know who to send the email to. They'll have already the language there. All you gotta do is put your email. Yeah, it's so easy, and it takes literally like 10. Yeah, and so I've done that with the Farm Bill to Senator Padilla. And guess what? He replied, his stamped signature. But I'm like, oh, I got a letter from Senator Padilla, because I sent a letter, like an email form. So easy. Anyone can do that. And you don't have to show your face. You just submit your email. By the way, I was just reminded that nonprofits can also lobby. There's rules here. I'm not going to go into them. But nonprofits, if you're a 501c3, you can't endorse candidates. That's a whole different other thing. But you can support bills, yes or no, and you can lobby. So you could say, and we do as an alliance, right? We just can't support candidates or political parties. So there's rules, but nonprofits can have a say. There are lobbyists. They exist. And tell us what a lobbyist is so people know.
I don't know. How do you define a lobbyist? I think the reality is that like lobbyists give us directions on how to navigate capitals. Sacramento, DC, if we contract a lobbyist, if I didn't have one, I wouldn't know mysterious deadlines for things. Like sometimes there's just so much of an insider game that if I didn't have one, I wouldn't be successful with anything, frankly. So there's definitely bad lobbyists, and they like peruse the offices and are buddies with all of these elected officials. And so sometimes there are good ones that do that same thing, but for folks like us. So just naming that there are good lobbyists out there, because I think they get a bad rap. See?
Yeah, so Estela's talking about having like a table for growers that can like learn about information, and I think in language access, right? Language access is important. So thank you, Estela. And yeah, and so lobbyist is kind of a fancy term for people kind of that know how to navigate political systems, but we can be those experts too, right? We might not be lobbyists, but we can do the same things where we're engaging our elected officials and making sure they listen to us, right? So any questions before we have like how many minutes? 5 minutes. Any questions? I love that we're on time. Yes.
So basically what I'm hearing is you follow CAF on Instagram. Highly recommend everybody do that. That's where I get most of my advocacy stuff out. And most recently, we gave good directions on calling about our tool sharing bill, and it was easy. We're getting better. Thank you. Great. Awesome. 20 seconds.
And then just on those things about whether it's effective or not, I mean, it's better than nothing because it's engagement, right? But I also, I sometimes get those, and I'm like, okay, I kind of look at them and I'm like, oh, I already know what they say, right? So I can just be like, okay, I got 10 of those on, so it is, when you send like an email and it's your own story, I mean, we're going to look at that a little more closely, right? But some engagement, any engagement is better than no engagement. And really, that's the lesson of today is get involved, get informed, meet your elected officials, go to them, go talk to them. Don't let them just do whatever they want. Make them listen to you. And also it helps them do their job better. Like me, I don't have all the answers and I need help. Like help me. I can't figure everything out by myself. So I love to hear from community. I really do. So good. Does anyone need worksheets or anything that didn't get one? Yes. And then remember to fill out the advocacy. And then you're going to close this out.
Yeah, so those Post-its you were writing earlier, please place them on any of these question 1, question 2, or question 3. If you wrote them all on one Post-it, just put them on question 1. I would love to read them and hear feedback and be able to kind of see what's going on in your communities. But otherwise, we're done. Thank you.